When you hear people talking about tough content in Final Fantasy XIV, you usually only hear about the raids, mainly the Savage and Ultimate ones. And while they are super difficult, time-draining bits of team content, there's some solo content in-game that is just as hard, and in some cases I'd say even more difficult than Ultimates or Savage. Before I mention the two that I'm talking about, I have to say something about collecting all of the triple triad cards. That forces you to do everything from extreme trials to fate grinding. It's more tedious than difficult, especially when cards themselves aren't even guaranteed drops every time you do dungeons or trials. Since that makes you touch a little bit of all of the content in game, I had to mention it when I'm talking about things that are actually pretty difficult to do. Now, the first bit of content that I have to talk about are the two deep dungeons, the Palace of the Dead and Heaven on High. Technically, neither one of these are primarily solo content, but there are two major title achievements for making it through each of these places alone. And aside from leveling up, that's the main thing that people go for. And it's a major challenge, unless of course you're Angelus Daemonis. That man has mastered both of these places and is going to showcase what's likely the hardest set of floors at GDQ next year, so shout out to him. But if you're trying to solo the Palace of the Dead, you have to make it through 200 floors, each covered in traps, enemies that can one-shot you, treasure chests that may explode or eat you, and bosses on every 10th floor except for 200 that will wreck you if you mess up any of the mechanics. And if you die, you have to start all of the way over at floor 1 if you want the achievement. That means you can spend hours just getting back to the boss that you died on to try and figure out the proper way to deal with it. Then of course there are some of the regular enemies that can even be worse than some of the bosses. On solo runs there are some enemies that you outright can't beat, so you have to avoid them or use specific dungeon items called pomanders to help take them down. To top it off, the way you have to play your job is way different from what it would be if you were doing regular content. Ninjas become dagger mages here, running around and throwing knives and lightning bolts like their lives depend on it, and red mages either master slide casting or they die. Heaven on High is a good bit easier than Palace of the Dead, but only because of the length and lack of a behemoth fight. But the difficulty spike between floors is serious. Palace of the Dead doesn't really get hard until about floor 141. The enemies gradually increase in strength and the mechanics get a little tougher. Heaven on High, being only 100 floors, has a major jump in difficulty when you hit floor 61. And by floor 81, you're running out of safe enemies to fight, meaning every pull is one mistake away from causing you to start over. So clearing these solo is a lot more time consuming and learning intensive than even some of the Savage content, and makes it into some of the most difficult content in the game. The other bit of solo content that can take a whole lot of time and skill to master is the Blue Mage. Now, the Blue Mage is the only limited job that they have in the game so far, although I think either the Beastmaster or the Puppet Master will end up as our next one. A Pokemon-style Beastmaster job where you go around taming different wild animals would be pretty cool, especially if they added in a Eureka-style zone for it. But with the Blue Mage, you go around collecting spells from different enemies, be they regular open-world monsters or trial bosses. Specific spells are needed to move forward with the story, but then you unlock the job's main piece of solo content, the Masked Carnival. Everything else can be done in a group, and some of it has to be since for now the job maxes out at level 70, but the carnival is a completely solo experience. There are 31 challenges for now that require certain spells as well as a good knowledge of the job to complete, and some of those fights are just horrible. Only 3 of them have to be completed to progress the story, but those specific ones are all on the level of extreme trials, possibly higher since you can recover from a mistake in an extreme trial. But if you mess up a mechanic in the carnival, it's pretty much a guaranteed wipe. There's some nice rewards like the creepy Malboro mount that you can get if you complete the Blue Mage content. But if you're just looking for a challenge and you don't have enough friends to learn the group raids, the Masked Carnival is a good place to spend a bit of your time. Not to mention if you're trying to nab all of the triple triad cards, then you'll have to do it because a few of them are locked behind this content too. Anyway, I've talked for long enough. So if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, share it, and if you really want to show your support, you can donate to the channel through the link in the description. Until next time, guys. Later.